Bienvenidos a otro episodio de GamersRD Podcast.
Okay, so we are live. How are you gals doing? So good to have you here.
So good
Thank
to
you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Always a pleasure. You have no idea what the surprise was when they told me Symmetra herself was coming to the podcast. And I was like,
Where is she? Is she
way.
here? Teleport? Where is she?
She's going to teleport into the podcast. Yeah, yes. So guys in the audience, these two ladies should not be unknown to anybody. We have Anjali Bhimani with us. She's the voice of Symmetra in Overwatch, voice of Rampart in Apex Legends. More recently, she was Aunt Ruby in Ms. Marvel, right? Mm-hmm. And she's in another million of TV shows. This woman's not short of work, for sure. And we also have Julia Bianco. And Julia Bianco was a special surprise to me because she's the casting director in games like Cyberpunk 2077, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which is one of my personal all-time favorites. We also have Spider-Man 2 in there. We have Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Although I'm not that big of a Nintendo guy, I know that game was like a huge thing. And you were also in Final Fantasy VII, right?
I've worked on quite a few games. Yes.
Yeah, like if you wanna know what a what a dense curriculum looks like, you can look at either of those two MTV profiles, and it's gonna be like 30 minutes of scrolling.
What's super fun is when when a game comes out and Julia and I find out, oh, we both worked on the same game.
Yep.
We didn't realize that we both worked on the same game because a lot of times, especially for actors, we don't know what the game is called. We don't know what, a lot of stuff is left NDA, quiet, silent,
Obviously.
So that we don't necessarily know what we're working on. So we've had quite a few things where we're like, oh, wait, we worked on that together. Huh? Who knew?
And I don't always know when they book you, so I'll hand off a casting and not know who they choose sometimes even, and so I'll be like, did I cast you in that, or was that someone else?
Yeah, so I mean, the pleasant surprises are always welcome, I guess. So Anjali, like I said, you're the voice of Symmetra, you're the voice of Rampart, and those are gigs that I assume require like a recurring presence of your voice. Like, I don't know, like in Overwatch, any new character comes out and probably Symmetra has a past with that character on the lore, and you have to record new voice lines and all that stuff. So how does that work really? Like, do you have a studio where you record everything yourself, or do they fly you somewhere to like a Blizzard studio or something like that?
Well, happily, they don't have to fly me because I live in Los Angeles, but I do, other than during the pandemic when everything was at home studios, I do usually go to an outside studio. We do have a studio at home that is professional quality, but
Cool.
I do prefer to go to the studio where they have hired the engineer and they are doing it, because then I really don't have to worry about anything technically. I can just hand that to the professionals and let them do that and let them, then I can focus on my job. So yeah, for both of those, we record in an outside studio here in Los Angeles. Most of the games that I do are recording in outside studios these days. Now that the pandemic has settled a bit, and, get out there. But the great thing about doing voiceover is that if I'm shooting something in another town or something, usually I can go to a local studio and they will make that work as well. So it's a very flexible. Companies have been very gracious about their flexibility when I've had to travel all over the world to do something else, which is great.
Cool. Yeah, and I guess between sound engineers, they speak their own weird language where they understand each other. And also, you mentioned something interesting, which is that you can focus on your performance as an actress when there is someone else there. Like right now, it's really common for you to see like musicians and independent voice actors on the rise and whatnot. You see them, how they know how to do a bit of everything. Basically, they do their own recording at home, and they do their mixing, and they do their mastering, effects, or whatever you want. Like in my case, I even do the music. So like, it's like a lot of things that you have to focus on that maybe prevent you from focusing on the smaller details within what you're doing, which is like, okay, so you get hired to be one of the characters of a game, or a character on a movie, or a TV show. And it brings me back to like bands in the 70s and 80s when they did music. Like the bands will focus on their instruments and their performance, and then you would have like the recording engineer is one guy, the mixing engineer is another guy, then the guy that does the mastering is another guy, and then there is an agency for the marketing, for distribution and publishing and all of that stuff. So everybody focuses on like their own small specialty, and like the final product comes out a little bit more refined than it would have if there's like a one-man army in there.
There are two sides to this. You know, it's sort of win-win, because as a performer, it's great to know how to do all of those things, because even if you don't have to do them, to know, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted Character Select to be the specific podcast that it is, because you have an appreciation for what everyone in every technical role has to do in order to make this performance come through the way that everybody wants it to come through. So yes, it is much less pressure when you can focus on one thing, but it's great to know about what everybody's doing, even if you just know a little about it, or just great to know because you might be recording in your home studio and you might need to do that. And if you can't deliver as good a performance when you're doing that, then, you know, unfortunately that means less work, or that means less good quality work. And with Character Select, one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast was to highlight the work of other people besides the actors who are involved in creating an incredible character and an incredible performance, because it's so much not only about the actors. You know, it's the sound designers, it's the engineers, it's the narrative director, it's the performance director, it's the casting director, it is the composer. There's so many people whose work goes into creating a great performance. And that's very much what Julia and I wanted to highlight when we decided to do this podcast.
I mean,
and there are all levels of production, because I work on a variety of different budget games and types of games. And there will be games where they can't afford a studio and you need to record at home, and they don't have an engineer, all the way up to there's a full-blown studio and they're flying you there to performance capture. There's all sorts of stuff. So the bells and whistles vary depending on the project and the budget and what the needs are. Whenever possible, we try to be as inclusive as possible and give the opportunity for people to go to studios, because no one should have to engineer themselves if they don't need to. But of course, there are lots of projects where we have to do it. So it's just kind of being adaptable.
I guess that more important than any of that is, there is like a real value in having like a homogeneous flow of communication. And like whenever someone wants to get a point across, everyone else in the room that is not necessarily specialized in that craft can understand like what that person wants to communicate. Like maybe the animators want to communicate something to the voice actors, or the voice actors want to communicate something to the composers, and they want to communicate something to, I don't know, like the guys, the people from utility, the people from editing, from coloring, or whatever, you name it. I guess that when each part of the production of a piece of art, because games are a piece of art, and so are movies and TV shows, let's be honest. You want to have like this, like all of the dots connected somehow, just so everyone kind of visualizes the same end game and the same objective. So Julia, let me ask you something. When you do the castings for, I'm not sure if this is even a question you can answer, but I'll just throw it at you anyways. So do you choose actors that you like, that you know? Do you do like an open thing where maybe the newcomers go to you and say, hey, this is what I can do, if I'm useful to you, just give a holler? How does that work? how's your workflow? Because it's more of a in the office, behind the stage type of thing that maybe not many people are acquainted to. So how does that work? So how's the day in the life of you as a casting director?
That's a good question. So it depends again on like the budget and the size of the project, because an indie game may have different needs than a big budget game. Performance capture casting is pretty different than voiceover casting. And so just kind of starting with some of those questions, whether it's a union project or not a union project, that is, those are the factors that go into my process. I try to be extremely open and accessible. I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I think it's really important to be able to see new talent, whether they come to me or whether I seek them out. I teach a lot. I travel a lot. I review a lot of resumes and reels. And I try to be very accessible. But ultimately, we go through kind of traditional casting means as you would for kind of any other media. We will send it out to agents. We will send it out on casting platforms, and that's specific casting calls with details like age and voice print and ethnicity. And if it's performance capture, we may have some physical specs. A lot of factors go into whether or not we record all in LA, or if there's some remote recording, or if there's a combination. So those are some of the kind of items that we're asking about as we're starting the casting call process. And then once we kind of do an initial call, we'll get a bunch of self-tapes back. Most of the time, that's the way we do it, is pulling self-tapes. And so we'll request, anywhere from 20 to 300 self-tapes. And we will review those all individually and narrow them down, usually to somewhere between 5 and 20, depending on the client. And in that process of narrowing, it's very important for me to make sure that I don't assume that I know what the client wants, and that I put together kind of a rainbow and a variety of options for them so that they can gravitate towards what they want. And if they want to see any more in any one kind of category or archetype, I can always give them more of that. But that's kind of my process.
The way Julia runs her process is such a great example of something that I think every actor needs to know, and not every actor really understands, which is that the casting director is on your side as an actor. They are trying so hard. They want you so badly to be the person that they hire. And they are doing, part of what they are doing is translating for you as the actor to the client, or for the client to you, so that everybody can be copacetic and actually create something that is potentially the thing. I think a lot of actors look at casting directors mistakenly think that they are gatekeepers. And there is an element of, okay, yes, they have to weed things out and they have to narrow it down to between.
There's a criteria.
5 and 20,
like,
5 and 20
whether
takes.
you like it or not.
Right, but casting directors, and this goes for not just video games, this goes for video games, television, theater, all of it. Mm-hmm. Casting directors, their job is on the line as much as our job is on the line, because they got to find the person. One way or the other, they got to find the person to fill that role. So they are dying to do, and again, Julia is such a great example of this, because she puts so much of her heart into this process and cares so much about actors. They want to give you the best chance of doing the best job for that particular process, for that particular game or show or whatever it is. And so I think it's really important to highlight that fact, because I think a lot of people who are maybe not necessarily young in age, but young in experience in the business, look at it as an adversarial relationship rather than a no. They want you here. They really want you here.
Right. And I think more important than any of that is that, like, once you put a development team together, whether it's the programmers, the designers, the actors, and the people who choose them, it's like a collective battle against the expectations of a fan base. Like, we know gamers are hardcore. They're really fucking hard to please. So it's like everyone's, I guess, in this constant passive panic state of, oh crap, are they gonna like it? Are they not gonna like it? Are they gonna like this character? Are they gonna like this voice line, or like there are so many decisions, and like the smallest mistakes can actually like screw the whole thing up. So I think like what you just said makes a huge amount of sense. Like, there should be, and you tell me like there's just like a misunderstanding among actors in that case.
And I would like to push back on what you said too, because yes, gaming audiences are very discerning and they will tell you when they hate something very vocally, but maybe people run around in a constant state of passive panic, but when you are creating something, there's this weird dichotomy, not dichotomy, what's the word? Like this weird paradox of can't create for just to make something that somebody else wants. You can't create with that in mind. Oh, what do they want? I have to give them that. You can't make great art, period, that way.
You can't please everyone.
Right,
more
but
than that.
No. It's not even about pleasing everyone. It's about understanding that great art doesn't come out of creating what someone else is telling you they want to do. That's just a recipe. That is a prescription. But great art comes out of inspiration. Great art comes out of authenticity. Great art comes out of people creating something together that hasn't existed before.
Exactly.
So on one hand, yes, you do want to create something that people will want to play or characters that they will enjoy. But on the other hand, you can't do it purely for them, because then you are left to the whims of a mass of people who may or may not even have imagined the cool thing that you are about to present to them could exist.
Right. It's more like letting people taste like the unfiltered, unseasoned essence of you as an artist. So like this is what comes from my insides. And
especially in games, when people are putting their heart and soul, forget about the actors, the developers, everybody has been working on this for like 3 years plus. They've put
in the case of Cyberpunk, it's 7.
They put in so much time and so much energy working down to the most minute detail. And if you are constantly thinking about what are they going to think of it, what are they going to think of it, what are they going to think of it, you can't do that.
You're going to second guess everything.
You cannot sustain a prolonged process if all you're thinking about is what is someone else going to think.
But I also think it's really a really interesting thread about kind of what you both are saying. And a thing we haven't talked about yet is that's why games have so much iteration. And that's why you may go in and do the same scene 6 times, because something may have changed amongst the dev process. And the whole thing is a work in progress. People are gonna change and change and change again. Then they're gonna test and they're gonna get feedback and they're gonna get people ripping XYZ apart and they're gonna change it again. And then they're gonna get a publisher in there and the publisher is gonna say, well, this isn't testing XYZ, so we're gonna change this. And that's, over a 3 to 7 year process. That requires actors to be adaptable. It requires actors to not get attached, because sometimes entire roles are cut, sometimes entire games are changed, and it has nothing to do with you. So it's really, there is so much of this pressure, and there are a lot of different parties involved in the decision-making process that may not have the actor's performance as the number one thing that they're looking at. And so I do think it is really important for consumers and actors to know that there is so much iteration and there is so much kind of change expected, because of trying to make a product work and be fun and be engaging and be challenging and have a story. I mean, it's a hard gig.
Yeah, especially with ongoing games. I mean, they'll nerf and buff characters all the time. They'll change storylines. They'll debug. They'll do all sorts of things that are way above my pay grade. That they will do all sorts of things to balance a game or to change it as per the feedback that they are getting from the players. And that kind of quality control in an ongoing game, like an Overwatch
Overwatch, where you move one number and the whole game turns itself apart. And then you have an entire player base killing the forums and complaining about literally everything.
Right, but I still think that is just a testament to how much they care about the thing that you created, because the thing that you created is special.
I mean, obviously, if you make changes to a game and you upload a patch every 2 weeks, that requires a great deal of effort, and it requires a lot of people working night and day, testing things and doing like to the best of their knowledge, trying to find out what works and what doesn't. Because at the end of the day, like that's kind of what live service games have always been about. Like the case of Overwatch, the case of Apex, the case of like Valorant, League of Legends, Dota, you name it. Like those games are constantly pumping out content. Sure, we may have a whole different conversation about how it is a business model, but at the end of the day, it's something that keeps you engaged. It's something that makes you come back to the game. Like Overwatch recently released a Cowboy Bebop set of skins, and I'm like, no way. And Cowboy Bebop is like this massive cult anime from the 90s maybe, I don't know, maybe a 15-year-old has never seen it or doesn't know what it is, but people like in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they live that age, like exactly like how it's supposed to be lived, and that brought memories back and all that stuff. So it again, like, I guess the amount of work that's put behind that, also, like, imagine what it is to like to pitch the business to the animation studios or whoever holds the right for Cowboy Bebop, and like trying to get on top of those people. Hey, can we work together? And then you have like a bunch of requirements and demands and all that stuff. And oh Jesus, like, I'm not built for office work. I'm sorry. So, ladies, let's talk about your podcast, because it really. So I'm like thinking, okay, so Anjali Bhimani has characters in several video games that are live services, and she's in like 2 out of every 5 trendy TV shows out there. She's everywhere. So, like, maybe it takes a superhuman to get all of that going without breaking apart. And now you have a podcast, which is an additional responsibility. Like, it's maybe like what, like a weekly production or something like that. It's going to take more work, more time from you. So, tell me about it. Where did the idea come from? How did you end up starting that?
Well, in order to do an additional thing like this, you need a partner like Julia. And good luck finding a partner like Julia, because she's. So we interestingly enough, we began becoming closer, talking about more things that we both do. We both became closer when both of our books came out at the same time, because Julia had written a book called The Art and Business of Acting for Video Games, and I had written my book, I Am Fun Size and So Are You. So we started doing kind of book events together because she suggested, hey, we both came out at the same time. Let's do fun stuff, which we did. And then we were both fortunate enough to be on the BAFTA jury for Best Supporting Performer in a Game a year or so ago. The timing is fuzzy. I can't believe, like, was it 22? Was it 23? I can't.
23.
Time's going by so fast nowadays. It's ridiculous.
I know. Time is a weird soup, as they say on Critical Role. But we had this wonderful experience of being in a Zoom with people from all different lanes in game creation, and everybody treating these performances that we were talking about with such reverence and respect, and talking about them from their own vantage points and their own expertise, their own lanes of expertise, talking about how the sound design may have affected a performance, and we may be seeing that, so don't judge on this, or how this must have been so hard for this actor because of this part of the game. Things that she and I really, we hadn't necessarily thought of when we were. I mean, I know I didn't. She knows a lot more about what goes into. She's been on the front lines of what goes into a video game from tip to toe. So we got off this 4-hour, 6-hour, whatever it was, Zoom, and immediately called each other, and we're like, we need this conversation to continue in public. We need people to know, that these performances are being treated with this kind of love and care behind the scenes. People really appreciate each other's virtuosity in what they create, but also highlighting all of the people that don't necessarily get noticed for the incredible performances because their contribution is behind the scenes. It's not on screen. So the idea for Character Select, and the title by Julia, that was her call, which I love so
the
much.
title, by the way.
It's such a great title.
Like, it's not a title that has podcast in it.
Well, true. I mean, it is the Character Select podcast. It is that, but Character Select is such a cool. It has double meaning, probably more than double meaning, but for me personally, because it's not just about like choose your hero that you're going to play with. It's about how do you select what parts of you're going to put into creating this character, and how does each artist behind the scenes, whether the sound designer or the narrative director or how does each person contribute to this character that they have selected to put all of their heart into. So yeah, we talked about that in like March-ish of last year. And then because we were both so incredibly busy, it took us a while to get it together. But I and my husband have a podcast production studio here in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So we had a space to bring people and to record. And we started recording, and here we are.
That is so cool. You guys started with your first episode back on Monday, the 25th of March. What did you talk about that on that one? Sorry, English. What did you talk about on that one?
So that episode, our inaugural episode, was our dear friend Matt Mercer, known for Critical Role.
One of my absolute favorite voice actors.
He's actually also an excellent human, and that was really important for us as well. And so, fortunately, when we asked, he jumped at the chance. And not only did he jump at the chance to talk, but one of the things we do uh, on the podcast is we talk about their journey, the guest's journey into games and their relationship with games. And then they pick a performance that's moved them or influenced them in video games. And so Matt Mercer selects David Hayter and Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid series. And so we talk about kind of Matt's entry into games, trading game cartridges with his grandma, and all the way up to his kind of reverence for Solid Snake and what a beautiful job David did with the role, and just kind of talking about how it influenced him and his future.
Interesting. So, talking about voice acting one more time, there is something I wanted to ask you specifically, Julia, because, for example, you worked as a casting director in Sekiro. I imagine you worked as a casting director for the English version of Sekiro, because the game's original in Japanese. So, is it any different for you to choose dub actors as opposed to like the base voiceovers that will be in the original language of the game? How do you go about that?
Yeah, one thing to note is that Sekiro specifically was co-developed. It was not dubbed. So the English and the Japanese were done at the same time, which means that when we were doing the English, we didn't have samples of the Japanese to go off of. So they're actually a little bit different. They're directed by different directors. There is a little bit of a difference in terms of performance because the English is not exactly matching the Japanese. Whereas like at Tears of the Kingdom, we're definitely going to have all of the Japanese files beforehand and we'll know, know in advance kind of what the tone is that's being set by the Japanese. And no, there's no such thing to me as like a category of actor. I kind of encourage actors to not put themselves in boxes like voiceover actor or dubbing actor, because at the end of the day, they're all actors. And ultimately, as technology gets easier, quicker, simpler, the media in which you're captured from and for is going to start merging together. So I think it's only helpful to kind of think of yourselves in general as an actor versus a specific type of actor. But I don't focus on dubbing versus VO for those types of roles. It's the best candidate for the job.
Right, but isn't there like any line of communication between, like, I don't know, you worked on Spider-Man 2, and for example, Spider-Man 2 comes up with a Latin American version. Do you speak at some point to the casting director of the Latin American version, or?
Not typically. Localized versions are not typically cast at the same time. The localization version is usually done later on, and it's usually done in a separate process.
Okay, so when you say localized version, is that like, okay, English exists, and from that you make the Spanish one? So what's the opposite case when both are made at the same time? How do you call it?
Co-development.
Co-development. Interesting.
Yeah, so when the English and Japanese is done at the same time, they're being developed at the same time, they're being co-developed, whereas a dubbed or localized version would be. There's also a difference kind of between like localization where it's going from Japanese to English versus any kind of English game going into the, FIGs is what we call it, French, English, German, Spanish are the main kind of localized languages.
Interesting. So, Anjali, why is it often that you're given any kind of creative voice, like when you're gonna work into a character? How much influence do you normally have, and I don't know, like the way that character is gonna talk, or the way that character is gonna behave, or what kind of language and verbiage that character is gonna use? Like, do they give you the stick to direct that orchestra at some point?
Well, it depends on the project, very much, and depends on what part of the process the actor comes in on. When we first started recording Symmetra, we definitely spent time the writer Michael Chu and the head writer Michael Chu and Andrea Toyas, who was both the director and the casting director over there at Blizzard. We definitely worked together to figure out what her voice was, not just her voice as in her like technical voice, but just how she was, what was her demeanor, what was the way she delivered lines. And so there was definitely input there in terms of what I wanted to bring to the table and what they were looking for. And as an actor, I mean, Julia has said this before, companies don't always know necessarily what they want. It's the actor that shows up and they're like, oh, that part of you, that's interesting. Let's cast that so that we can develop that more into a character. The only, one of the places in other media that I see that is like, if you cast a series regular on a television show, they are really looking at the essence of that person because they're going to have to develop more things around that character as they go on that haven't been written. So knowing that you're going to have a long-term relationship with a character, yes, there's a little more input in that department. Same thing with Rampart. As far as lines are concerned, it's I at least in my experience, it's very rare that you have input, particularly when it's just voiceover as opposed to performance capture. Although there are a couple of lines here and there that have made it into games because, or sounds that have made it into games because they came out of me. Because I'm very happy about. Rampart has a devious laugh because that's my laugh when I'm laughing at her own jokes. She also says dope because I say dope a lot, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it really depends on the game. It depends on the size of the role. It depends on how fast they need to get it out. Some games you're like, record it and all of a sudden it's out next month. And then other games you record it and you forget that you recorded it by the time it comes out. So yeah, it varies. It definitely varies.
And do you remember what your first gig was?
My first voiceover gig?
Yeah.
It was recording the disclaimer at the top of Tosh.0, which is a TV show here in the States, but I had to record it in Hindi, which is funny because I don't speak fluent Hindi. So they sent me the audition and I called my dad immediately and I was like, Dad, oh my God, can you say this? Can you say this really slowly and then say it fast into a like record it on your phone?
So you were born in the US?
I was born in the US, yeah.
Okay.
And so he recorded it, and then I and my husband with our, my husband's a musician, so we have a ton of recording equipment and all of that at home. We recorded it at home. And I am very happy to say that at least one of my skills is to talk very fast. So we got that in, and they ended up liking the take so much that they used my actual audition in the show, which worked out well. But
how long ago was that?
Well, that was 2015, and interestingly enough, that was also my first job. My second job was Overwatch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But you've been in TV shows since before 2015.
No. I've been acting since a long time ago. I think my first professional gig was 1997. So I started in the theater, did a ton of theater, went to Broadway, did all of that. Started doing television when I was in New York, around when I did the Broadway stuff. Then started going back and forth between New York and LA to do TV. And then when I stayed put in LA, that's when the voiceover stuff started happening. So it's definitely not like, oh, fluke luck, her second job ever was Overwatch. But because I do think my theater background in particular helped me a lot in my voiceover career. Because so much of what I did not only was dependent on the actual instrument, the vocal instrument, but was dependent on distilling characters down so that you could convey a lot of who they are in just how you say one or two lines. I think that was very, very, very helpful in this process. But yeah, no, I've been acting for a hot minute. I just the voiceover stuff was a new lane, was a new branch of the tree, as I like to describe it.
Do you have one that you like the most?
No, I love them all, and it's different, just like speaking different languages that have the same root. They're completely different languages, but they all at their core, it's storytelling and making sure that the story comes across and that anything you do as the character is to serve the story. So the reason I don't pick one is because I don't want to. I love it all. It's all just really fun ways to convey story.
That's interesting. So any upcoming projects that you want to tell us about?
So many upcoming projects that I can't tell you about because they're secret. I can tell you about a couple of things that have just recently aired in the actual play tabletop gaming space. We just aired the final episode of the first season of Basic Quest, which is Dungeons and Dragons actual play show, but the world of the show is inspired by India. So it is a fully South Asian leading cast, and all of our guests are from other backgrounds. So we are inviting people in to really play in our culture and learn about it in a very safe environment, in a fun environment, and hopefully bringing that audience in that same way, because we want people to feel both like they've been invited to the party, they can enjoy the party, and they can also like ask questions that they might not necessarily feel safe asking in the world. We want to really demonstrate that kind of inclusivity where we are inviting people in, not saying like, why don't you know about our culture? We're saying, come, let's play in it. Let's show you. We love having you here. Welcome to the party.
Yeah.
So that just Tuesday night, actually, we just aired the final episode of season 1.
Cool.
And then I know I have a bunch of stuff, obviously the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm trying to think of anything that I am allowed to talk about publicly.
Don't get in trouble.
I can't think of
Don't get in trouble. You know, it's interesting because I've always had like several friends that are like super into D&D, but it's such a tough sphere to pierce through. Like there's so much to it.
I will challenge you on that. What do you think is tough to pierce into? What do you mean by that?
I don't know. Like you get a Super Mario, someone that's only played Super Mario, and you give him Overwatch as their first video game.
Yeah. No, okay. I see what you mean. The difficulty level. Oh, and you know what? I did just remember one more thing that I can tell you guys about, and it has to do with D&D. So the way I describe Dungeons and Dragons is it's for people who are afraid of starting to play. It's an open book test, and your friends can help you with your answers.
Yeah.
So there is no barrier to entry other than your own imagination and willingness to play. Everything else is gravy. Yes, there are a bunch of books, and yes, there are a bunch of rules, but you don't have to worry about memorizing them. You just come play with us. Just come to the table and play. And one of the thing that I just remembered, thank you, Grace, the thing that I just did recently was, so for those of the listeners who are not listening or who haven't played D&D before, when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, there are the players, and then there is someone called the Dungeon Master, who is essentially running the game, setting the world up, playing all of the non-player characters, doing, basically sort of like stage managing, directing, doing all of these things. And it's a very complex job. And I recently got to do it for the first time with there's been a collaboration between the Lego group and Wizards of the Coast, who created Dungeons and Dragons. There's been a collaboration between them, and they asked me to come in and DM. So now, again, barrier to entry, I could have said, oh no, there's so many books, there's so many rules I don't know. Oh no, what am I going to do? But having played for so long, I know for a fact that even when you read the books, even in the books, it says, yeah, here are all these rules. All we care about is that you have fun, so make it your own. You don't have to follow these rules if you don't want to. So there is this element of, it is a structure, it is a universe for you to play in, it gives you options, but ultimately it's all about what you want to do and how you and your friends want to bring things to the table. So on April 6th, we will all get to see whether I was good at it or not. But that is going to be airing. There is an actual play, one shot, based on that is the adventure that is based on the new Lego set that has come out, that is a collaboration between Dungeons and Dragons and the Lego group. And it's such a cool set. I cannot even begin to tell you. It is such a cool set. I'm really excited for people to.
I guess I'm gonna have to call some of my friends now and tell them that Anjali Bhimani just challenged me to take a swing at D&D.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the gauntlet has been thrown. And look, if you're having any questions about it, you know where to find me. Like, Anjali, how do I do this? Like, give me a heads up. Because again, the community, especially the D&D community, the whole tabletop community and the gaming community at large, are so inviting. They want people to play with. Everybody wants people to play with.
They are.
So the more the merrier. The more the merrier. Don't let yourself be deterred by books. Don't let that be like, yes, there will be those of us who are like, well, you have to know, like, I know this rule and I know that rule. But just because someone knows the rules doesn't mean they're a better player than you. It just means they know the rules better than you.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite experiences playing D&D are with people who were playing for the first time and came up with some of the most extraordinary choices that I may not have thought of because I was working within the confines of the rules. And they did, because they didn't know what they didn't know. And your dungeon master's job is to incorporate, part of the job is to incorporate whatever the players give them into making this a fun time.
Absolutely. That's what games have always been about. It's about having fun, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially like in online gaming, I'm very active in the likes of Overwatch and Rainbow Six Siege. And I'm like, dude, why do you tilt over it? Like, why are you stressing so much? It's a game. You're supposed to have fun with it, you know?
Yeah. Everybody has their own way of dealing with that. But just like, you know, when people talk about toxicity in games.
Oh, yeah.
When people talk about that, this may be a simplistic way to look at it, but this is my take on it, which is, if I walk into a party and someone is being a jerk to me, I'm just not going to hang out with that person. Correct. So find the person at the party you want to hang with. Same thing online. Find the people you want to play with, because they're out there. They are there. Your own friends or people you don't know. They are absolutely there. Their voices might not be as loud as the toxic folks, but they are absolutely there.
Right. And it's like, you know, like when it comes to toxicity, like there is such a nuanced and complex conversation to have about it that could literally take another 4 episodes of a podcast. but it's like, there is no such thing as a monochromatic filter in humanity. So you're going to find people that you just can't stand. You're going to find people that are probably, I don't know, like not discreet, not respectful, or people that are like too loud, or they don't like to mind their own business and that sort of stuff. And you're like, oh, well, maybe this is not the type of person that I want to have around me. It's really that simple. It's exactly what you said. You walk into a party and there is a guy that's being a jerk to you. Just don't hang out with him. Hang with the people that you like. Now, I do have a question for you. You just mentioned that your husband's a musician. What kind of music are you guys into?
The good kind. We like good music.
That is a controversial term you just used there.
I know. But like, it's subjective, right? There's very little music that I am not into. I suppose I don't like death metal so much.
Oh, come on.
That's a thing. It serves its purpose in a certain way. It is not my jam, but it is the jam of many other people. I love classic rhythm and blues.
Oh yeah.
Classic jazz.
I just saw, so there's this YouTuber, you probably know who he is. It's called Rick Beato. And he had, he's one of the greatest gifts of YouTube to humanity as a musician. He's like basically more of a music appreciation type of channel, but he does everything. He does like direction of orchestras. He does symphony. He does jazz, blues, rock, metal, you name it. But he had George Benson over for a like 1 hour interview, and that was pure light. Like that man is so admirable, so reputable, such an enlightened person. He's like 80 already. And I'm like, dude, I wish my life was half as healthy as this man's, you know? But yeah, so keep going. Sorry, I just
no, it's okay. I want to hear what Julia is listening to right now.
Go ahead, Julia.
I a lot of Olivia Rodrigo. I have an 8-year-old, so a lot of my music tastes tend to go towards hers as well. But a lot of Olivia Rodrigo, some Beyonce, and then a little bit of punk rock sprinkled in there for good measure. So
cool.
I really want to get your little girl into Pink.
I know, yeah.
We gotta introduce her to Pink, because Pink is one of the greatest artists of all time. I love her so much.
Oh, you know, there's this T-shirt on the internet that is like a pink T-shirt with a unicorn and a rainbow that says "I love death metal." You should get one of those.
She actually does like metal. So
yeah, I'm a metal dude. I'm definitely very, very much a metal dude, but I'm like into everything. And like currently I'm working.
I'm talking about death metal though, like hardcore death metal. It's not that.
So there's let me throw 2 grains of sand in there. It depends on the type of death metal and where it's being made. So it's like when it's Swedish death metal, for example, the death metal you get in Gothenburg and the death metal you will get in Stockholm are almost 2 entirely different genres.
Oh wow.
So like Gothenburg is more brutality and more density and wall of sound, whereas Stockholm is more groove, more rhythm. It sounds cleaner. Like a distorted electric guitar is not excruciating to listen to. And then you have the American death metal that can be one or the other. Then Norwegian death metal is like even more extreme than Gothenburg death metal. But that's kind of the one of the daunting things about metal is that there is like 30 new subgenres every single year. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm oddly familiar with metal because in voiceover, a lot of our screamers and creature vocalists come from that world. So that's a lot of where we source that kind of talent because they have so much ability vocally to thrash without ruining their vocal cords.
Yeah, and I say that
superhero situation to me. Like it is incredible the things that they can do with their voices.
If Molly Daisy does a lot of the creature vocals, and she's also a metal singer, and she recently got scoped, and they like showed she got to see how her vocal cords actually work when she's doing certain things, and fascinating.
I want to watch that.
And you know how they say that like metalheads at some point there is some sprinkles of gaming in anyone that became a metal person. Right, because if you think about it, like gaming music has been such an influential thing that has been getting printed into our subconscious ever since like the Tetris music, the Super Mario tunes, the Donkey Kong tunes, and then you get into the Nintendo 64 era and we get into like digital symphonic sound, and the PlayStation starts coming in, the Xbox games, the PC games, they start just pushing the envelopes over and over and over again. And then you have games like Doom where Mick Gordon literally rewrites history in terms of metal. So like
Metal Gear Rising.
Yeah, exactly.
I produced the music on.
So I recently, well, I say recently, but it was like more than a year ago that I reviewed this game called Metal Hellsinger. It's from an indie studio. So it's kind of like a Doom style game where you shoot everything that moves, but there is a click and you have to shoot with the click, otherwise you do no damage. But the songs are like super heavy metal tunes, and you have like the singer from Ginger, the singer from Arch Enemy, the singer from Trivium, the guy from System of a Down, Serge Tankian. You have like very, very known singers there singing the back the soundtracks. So they're essentially metal songs, and they also work in a way where the game summons pieces of music that's being used a lot as well in like single player games and whatnot. Like, okay, you're walking and you're just looking at things, and it's just like the beat with the drums and that sort of stuff. First, a batch of monsters shows up, and the guitar's kicking, and the music starts getting heavy.
That's
and
awesome.
as more monsters show up, then the singer comes in and starts screaming. It's incredible. It's like more of a musical experience than it is a video game. And I'm like, wow.
That's very cool.
And you feel like
that would be a way that I would maybe get into that genre, because there's like a very specific purpose to it. And look, when there's rhythm and anything that's got rhythm and groove,
right.
I'll check it out.
Right.
For sure.
Absolutely. So we're almost at the hour mark. Anything you gals want to add?
Just please join us for Character Select, because we are so excited about putting this baby into the world. We have so many great guests lined up for this first season.
What are the platforms you're broadcasting on?
We are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, just audio, and then we're on YouTube. It's at Care Select Pod, so CHAR Select POD. For people who want to see the handsome and beautiful faces of our guests as well as hear their beautiful voices.
Yeah, Matt Mercer is a handsome dude for sure.
He's a handsome dude. It's undeniable. It's undeniable. And we've got other beautiful people. We've got other beautiful, kind, lovely human beings coming on the show as well. So yeah, those three places right now. And then for bonus content, people can join our Patreon, where we're going to be doing some extra fun stuff for the folks who support the show.
So, and that's called Character Select on Patreon as well, right?
Yep.
And also, I'm going to be putting your Instagram handles on by your faces on once the interview comes out. But you can follow Anjali and at Sweet Anj, if I'm not mistaken. Sweet
That's right,
A and J.
Yep, with 3 E's.
3 E's, so it's Sweet Anj.
Exactly. What's funny is that that's not completely off. It's based on my high school nickname in the drama department, and they'd always say it, "Sweet Anj." They'd say it like that. So that's how I got the 3.
That's funny, and it's lovely that you kept it this far.
Yeah.
We also have at Julia BS Casting to follow Julia Bianco and her latest updates.
And don't forget to check out her book, because especially if you are interested in acting and being part of that, being a part of.
Yeah. So let's recap to the name of the books and where you can get them as well.
Yeah, mine is The Art and Business of Acting for Video Games, and it's available on Amazon and all of the book selling avenues online.
And then mine is I Am Fun Size and So Are You, Thoughts from a Tiny Human on Living a Giant Life. And you can get that on Amazon. You can get the audiobook on Audible. You can also get the ebook in barnesandnoble.com. And you can get signed hard copies at streamily.com/Anjali Bhimani.
Cool. So I guess that wraps it up. And I want to thank you guys in the audience for the ever so present support, for being here with us, for making all these interviews possible as well. And this was your favorite vampire, In and Out. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Esto fue GamersRD Podcast de gamers para gamers. Hasta la próxima.